The province of British Columbia, on Canada's west coast, is known for its stunning scenery and unparalleled natural beauty. Every summer, tourists and locals alike connect with nature by setting up tents in many of the province's parks. Some paths have been well-trodden for years, while others, like Wells Gray Provincial Park, remain more remote. Located about 5 hours northeast of Vancouver, Wells Gray is a vast and nearly uninhabited wilderness. In the early 1980s, this quiet region became the backdrop for one of Canada's most shocking crimes. On August 2, 1982, Bob and Jackie Johnson, 44-year-old Bob and his 41-year-old wife Jackie, set out from their home in Kelowna with their two daughters, 13-year-old Janet and 11-year-old Karen, for a 2-week vacation in Wells Gray Park. Shortly after their arrival, they were joined by Jackie's parents, 66-year-old George Bentley and 59-year-old Edith Bentley, who came in their brand new 1981 Ford Camper Special. The family loved camping in the wild, but this was their first time visiting Wells Gray. They had heard it was breathtaking and wanted to experience it together. What was supposed to be a beautiful 3-generation family vacation in a scenic park was shattered by a heartless predator who decided to bring his vile fantasies about young girls to life. When Bob Johnson failed to show up for work on August 16th, 2 weeks after setting out on vacation, his colleagues and friends became alarmed. In 25 years, he had never missed a day of work without a valid reason, let alone without notifying anyone. After making a few phone calls, his co-workers discovered that the entire family had not returned from their camping trip. At first, they assumed the family may have experienced car trouble or had simply been unable to contact anyone from the remote wilderness. But after waiting a week with no news, on August 23, 1982, the family's friends reported them missing to the RCMP. A massive search operation began in Wells Gray Provincial Park. However, as the days passed one after another, the hope of finding the family faded more and more into the distance. On September 12th, after 3 weeks of fruitless searching, a mushroom forager contacted the police with chilling news. Deep in the forest, he had discovered a burned-out vehicle. The license plates confirmed it belonged to the Johnson family. When officers approached the vehicle, what they saw shocked even the most seasoned investigators. On the back seat were the charred bones of several individuals. But it was when they managed to pry open the trunk that even hardened detectives recoiled. The skeletal remains of children lay inside. While only dental records would confirm their identities, police were now almost certain they had found all 6 missing family members. As forensic teams continued to comb the area, more clues emerged. Near a road, they discovered freshly cut branches, clearly placed to conceal a makeshift path leading to where the vehicle had been dumped. Inside the vehicle, they also found a bloody axe handle. It was obvious someone had gone to great lengths to hide the car deep in the woods, away from any obvious route, suggesting a local perpetrator familiar with the terrain. The positioning of the bodies led investigators to believe that the victims had not died in the fire. They appeared to have been placed there. This was confirmed when a bullet hole was discovered in a partially intact skull. The projectile matched a .22 caliber round. The authorities now knew they were dealing with one of Canada's worst mass murders. But one key element was still missing: the Bentley's trailer. If they could locate the trailer, they might find the killer. In parallel, police canvassed the local area door to door, asking if anyone had seen any of the 6 missing family members. Within a week, this effort paid off. A park employee reported spotting a similar trailer parked at Old Bear Creek prison site, a remote campground deep in the woods. Investigators rushed to the site. The clearing was a known spot for campers. As they searched the area, they quickly spotted camp cookware, matching that seen in photos of the Johnson family. In a nearby spring, they found beer bottles, neatly placed to keep them cold. The brand matched Bob Johnson's known preference. 2 sharpened sticks were found by the fire pit, likely used by the girls to roast mushrooms. All evidence suggested the family had been camping peacefully at Bear Creek until something horrific happened. And then came the next chilling discovery: a spent .22 caliber shell casing. A closer sweep turned up 5 more. Now certain Bear Creek was the murder scene, police chose not to disclose this to the media. Around the same time, information surfaced about witnesses who may have seen the missing trailer. Police received a tip from a man who claimed he had followed a camper, matching the description to a gas station in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. 2 disheveled men exited the vehicle and walked into a nearby diner. Investigators pursuing this lead found other witnesses who confirmed seeing the Ford and 2 men with French accents. Detectives believed that they were now following their most promising lead. They brought in a sketch artist and produced composite images of two men in their early 20s who spoke with French-Canadian accents. Photos of the men and the vehicle were distributed to the media nationwide, and soon investigators were overwhelmed by a flood of phone calls. The volume of tips convinced police they were on the right track. Someone was indeed traveling east in the stolen camper, heading toward the Ontario-Quebec border. However, as time passed, the number of calls began to decline, and the Ford still hadn't been located. In an effort to jog witnesses' memories, police recreated George and Edith Bentley's trailer in exact detail, down to the aluminum boat strapped to the roof, and on May 9, 1983, began a tour from British Columbia to Quebec. Before arriving in each town, police held press conferences, hoping someone would recognize the Ford and recall something useful. They received over 1,300 calls, but none led to a breakthrough. Police announced a $7,500 reward, printed 10,000 flyers, and sent them to other police departments and post offices across North America. Additionally, they agreed to help a TV crew shoot a documentary about the case on location in Bear Creek. Finally, in September, a promising tip came in, the most significant one in months. A local mechanic in Ontario called the police and said he had repainted the Ford camper for two young men. Not only that, the men had a .22 caliber rifle they wanted to get rid of. The mechanic said the pair were headed to Detroit, Michigan. But before investigators could alert their U.S. counterparts, the case took an unexpected turn. On October 18, 1983, 14 months after the murders in Wells Gray Park, two park rangers discovered a burned-out Ford camper less than 15 kilometers from the crime scene. It was George and Edith Bentley's trailer. It had been deliberately hidden in such a way that no helicopter flying overhead could have spotted it. The trailer had been torched using an accelerant, likely gasoline mixed with another substance. Detectives were stunned to realize they had been chasing a false lead all along. The camper had never left the park, and now all the suspect sketches were useless. A year of investigation had just gone up in smoke, and they had to start over from square one. The very next morning, detectives and forensic experts returned to the park to search for fresh evidence. The condition of the vehicle confirmed not only that the family had met a violent end, but also that a shooting had taken place. In the driver's door, investigators found a bullet hole consistent with a .22 caliber round, though they chose not to reveal this detail to the press. At the time, they had no idea this decision would eventually help them crack the case. Despite the trailer being completely destroyed by fire, one fact was undeniable. The person who had hidden it knew the area extremely well. So in October 1983, the police decided to once again go door to door and speak with every local resident, this time in greater detail. After 2 weeks of canvassing, they uncovered something intriguing. While talking to one couple, the wife casually mentioned something a man named Dave had said. He'd asked about how to transfer vehicle ownership and what to do about a bullet hole in a car door. The Dave she was referring to was 24-year-old David William Shearing. He had since moved away from the Wells Gray area, but at the time of the crime, he had been living in his parents' home not far from the park. Police had spoken to him once before, and at the time, his answers hadn't raised any red flags. While police were trying to track Shearing down, they received another tip. A caller told them that back in 1980, Shearing had hit someone with his car on a road in Wells Gray Park and then fled the scene. The police discovered that Shearing was now living in Tumbler Ridge, about 600 kilometers from Wells Gray. Constable Ron German of Tumbler Ridge was already familiar with Shearing. He had first encountered him 2 months earlier when he stopped Shearing and two of his friends late at night. German had asked about the expensive tools in Shearing's car, and Shearing claimed they were his and that he was just coming back from work. However, the very next morning, 2 local companies contacted German to report break-ins and the theft of tools valued at $40,000. The very same tools German had seen in Shearing's car. As a result, Shearing was released under the condition that he regularly report his whereabouts to law enforcement. On November 16, 1983, German received a call from investigators working the Wells Gray family murder case. They informed him that the petty thief he had been monitoring, David Shearing, was now a suspect in one of Canada's most horrifying crimes. But they asked German not to arrest Shearing for the murders. Doing so would ruin their one advantage, the element of surprise. During the 2-hour drive to the interview, Shearing would have plenty of time to rehearse a story if he suspected anything. With no hard evidence against him, The investigators' only hope was to catch him off guard and secure a confession. So the next morning, Constable German approached Shearing on the street and casually told him that some investigators in Dawson Creek wanted to ask him a few questions about another matter. He assured Shearing that he was not under arrest, and Shearing agreed to get into the car and go to Dawson Creek voluntarily. Upon arrival, the unsuspecting Shearing was handed over to Sergeant Mike Eastham and Constable Ken Liebel. The investigators knew that the moment a lawyer showed up, Shearing would likely go silent. So despite having no physical evidence, they were determined to get a confession. Hoping to catch him off guard, Eastham began the interview by questioning Shearing about a different crime, the hit-and-run incident. Immediately, the detectives noticed a visible sense of relief wash over Shearing's face, as if he were thinking, "That's all?" Moments earlier, he had appeared anxious, sweating and shifting his eyes nervously. But now, he relaxed and readily admitted to the hit and run. He seemed confident that he could confess to the lesser crime and then go home. Then suddenly, the conversation shifted to the main investigation. When asked if he had heard about the murders, Shearing acknowledged he had. After all, the entire country knew about the case. But when Sergeant Eastham casually asked if he knew where the murders had taken place, Shearing responded, "Wasn't it Bear Creek?" That was the slip. Only the killer could have known the location, as Bear Creek had never been released to the media. Trying to seem innocent, Shearing had just made a critical mistake. The investigator's tone became more direct and accusatory, and Shearing began to unravel. His nervousness returned, and under pressure, his defense collapsed. Finally, he broke down, sobbing, and confessed to the murders. Shearing told them he attacked the adults while they were sitting around the campfire, then went after the girls, who were in the tent. He placed the bodies in their car and drove it in the middle of the night to a mountainside, where he set it ablaze using 5 cans of gasoline. He then cleaned up the campsite and towed the trailer to his parents' home, later burning it too when he realized how difficult it would be to re-register it. Shearing insisted the motive was robbery. He claimed he wanted to take the family's car, camper, and boat. But investigators already suspected his true motive was something far more disturbing. Following his confession, Shearing led investigators back to the crime scene in Wells Gray and reenacted the events. He also brought them to his parents' home, where he had hidden numerous belongings from the Johnson and Bentley families, including the .22 caliber rifle. On April 16, 1984, the perpetrator appeared in court and pleaded guilty. The next day, Judge McKay sentenced David Shearing to 6 concurrent life sentences without the possibility of parole for 25 years. This was the maximum possible sentence for a second-degree murder, and the first time in Canadian history that such a sentence had been handed down. However, many were surprised that the sentences were concurrent, meaning Shearing would still be eligible for parole. He did not contest the verdict. The case was closed, but Sergeant Eastham, who had worked on it for almost 2 years, simply could not believe that Shearing had taken so many lives just for a robbery. Before the trial, he made a deal with the accused. Once the trial was over, he wanted to hear the truth from Shearing. He also hinted to him that he would be writing a report on his compliance with parole conditions, which would affect Shearing throughout his imprisonment. After the guilty verdict was delivered, RCMP Sergeant Mike Eastham said to Shearing, "You know why I'm here, David. I think you did something to those girls before you killed them. You told me some time ago that you'd consider telling me the whole truth after the verdict. Well, now I'm here to hear the whole story, and I won't accept no as an answer, David." And Shearing told Eastham what really happened. He had noticed Janet and Karen and decided to capture them, even if it meant killing their parents and grandparents. Shearing said he saw the family when they set up camp and spent several days spying on them and fantasizing about the girls. At dusk on August 10, 1982, he approached the camp with a rifle and cold-bloodedly shot Bob, then Jackie, George, and Edith. The girls were already inside the tent, getting ready for bed. Shearing said he looked inside and told them that a dangerous biker gang was nearby and that their parents had gone for help. While the girls stayed in the tent, he moved their parents and grandparents to the back seat of the car and covered them with a blanket. Then he entered the tent where the defenseless girls remained. The man put them in the car where the bodies lay and drove to a fishing cabin on the Clearwater River. Shearing confessed to Eastham that Janet and Karen remained alive for about a week, staying with him both in the small fishing cabin on the river and in his house. All the while, he exploited the fact that they were completely under his control. The saddest part is that at one point the girls could have been discovered and saved. Prisoners from the local jail were allowed to fish in the river. A prison guard who supervised them came to the cabin to warn Shearing not to worry about them just at the time when the girls were there. But during the conversation, Shearing hid the sisters behind the door and ordered them to be quiet. The guard noticed nothing unusual and left. Fearing another unexpected encounter, Shearing moved the girls to his family's farm, where their ordeal continued. Unfortunately, having gotten everything he wanted, Shearing had no intention of letting the sisters go. On August 16th, he took Karen into the woods and used his weapon again. The next day, he did the same with the older sister, Janet. Then he moved them to their parents' hidden car, drove to a remote location, and set the vehicle on fire. To verify this story, Eastham found the very guard. The guard recalled the encounter exactly as Shearing had described it. Then RCMP Constable Ken Leibel trekked through dense brush to the fishing cabin. Shearing told Leibel that he had scratched his initials on the wall there. The constable did indeed find them next to other letters, JJ, which corresponded to the initials of 13-year-old Janet Jackson. 25 years later, the constable said in an interview, "That's how close everyone was to them. If not for cruel fate, those wonderful little girls would be alive today." October 2015. Marej and her daughter Sophia were having dinner at a restaurant in Kampala, Uganda, where the mother had come from the Netherlands to visit her daughter. She looked at Sophia with love and thought about what a grown, independent, yet kind and wonderful young woman she had become. 21-year-old Sophia was on the verge of becoming a doctor, specializing in tropical medicine. She had just completed an 8-week internship at a Ugandan hospital and was thrilled with her work, the people around her, and the country as a whole. Mother and daughter dined, laughed, and discussed future plans. The girl admitted that she liked it in Uganda, and if the hospital asked her to stay a couple more months, she would agree. For now, she had decided to go on safari, visit several more towns and local national parks. She would be accompanied by other students from the Netherlands and an experienced guide. The trip promised to be very enjoyable, and there was nothing for her mother to worry about. Apparently, that was the case, because about a week later, Sophia called her mother and excitedly told her about the journey. She and a group of tourists were on a boat trip along the White Nile in the country's largest national park, and the girl was beside herself with happiness. However, just a few hours later, Marej received a call from one of her daughter's friends, who shocked her with the news that Sophia had disappeared, as if she had vanished into thin air. She had stepped away for literally a couple of minutes, and now they couldn't find her anywhere. The local police hastily closed the case, claiming that the girl had fallen victim to a dangerous animal, of which there are plenty in the Nile Basin. But Marej uncovered information never meant for her eyes or ears, and what she found changed everything. The police had no body, no blood, only the truth they had kept hidden for far too long. The girl's underwear was found in a tree 5 meters above the ground. Her pants had been cut into thin, even strips and wound around branches, while the rest of her belongings were neatly laid out for display. What kind of animal arranges its prey's belongings? Only one, the most dangerous animal in this world, one that lives not in the jungle, but in the concrete jungle. Sophia Isabella Frederica Kwetsir was born on April 2, 1994, in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, into a warm and loving family of Gerard Kwetsir and Marie Slickerman. Sophia was the eldest of 3 children. She grew up as a bright and ambitious girl. As a child, she developed a love for theater and attended the Amsterdam Theater School for several years. She was also fond of hockey and basketball and often went running in Vondelpark. Later, however, her attention became fully captured by medicine. She realized what she wanted to dedicate her life to, becoming a specialist in tropical medicine. It was an excellent choice for Sophia, one that allowed her to combine science and education with the possibility of visiting the most remote corners of the planet. She completed her bachelor's degree and was soon to become a doctor. But she wasn't in a hurry to begin her clinical residency. Instead, in August 2015, she flew to Uganda to complete an 8-week internship at a hospital in Lubega. The young woman enthusiastically threw herself into her hospital internship. She assisted in surgeries, in childbirth, and even scrubbed the floors when no one expected her to. She adored her work and gave herself to it completely. She even began learning the local Luganda language so she could communicate with patients without a language barrier. Her colleagues loved her for her diligence, compassion, and cheerful spirit. They gave her the nickname the Morning Sunshine. Local children adored her as well. They would often follow Sophia around simply to be near her. Inspired by such a warm reception, Sophia even admitted to her mother that one day she would like to move to Uganda. On October 21st, she and her mother met in Kampala, where Marie had come to visit her daughter. The girl's 8-week internship had come to an end, but Sophia decided to stay in Uganda a little longer. After saying goodbye to the nurses, she set off on a safari together with 2 other Dutch students and a local guide, Michael Kijambu. Marie let her daughter go with an easy heart. The girl had worked hard at the hospital and had earned this rest. Over the course of 5 days, the small tourist group visited Fort Portal, Kidepo Valley National Park, Gulu, and Pakwach before reaching their final destination, Murchison Falls National Park. This is the largest park in Uganda, attracting travelers with its breathtaking waterfalls and diverse wildlife. The group arrived at the park around noon on October 28th. Upon arrival, they went for a boat ride along the Victoria Nile, the smaller of the Nile's 2 main tributaries. After the boat trip, the tourists and their guide stopped at an educational center where they planned to spend the night. The center was simple, consisting of huts, a few common areas, and the most primitive toilets nearby. It was around 6:30 p.m., and darkness was beginning to fall as the group started unpacking their backpacks. Sophia told the others she was going to relieve herself and headed toward the toilets just a few meters away. In her hands, she carried a plastic water bottle, which she used for throwing away trash. After all, during the safari, trash bins were almost nowhere to be seen. When the girl hadn't returned after 15 minutes, the other members of the group began to worry. They checked the toilets, searched the camp, and, not finding Sophia, hurried to report it to the rangers, who immediately began the search. However, the search was greatly complicated by the approaching night and the dangerous area they were in. After all, the Victoria Nile, a section of the White Nile, is the natural habitat of lions, hippos, and crocodiles. Sophia's fellow student friends came up with an unusual idea. They played Sophia's favorite song, Isabella by Saudi Soul, over and over again in the car, hoping that if she had lost her way, she might hear the music and be able to follow the sound. Unfortunately, this did not work. By 9 o'clock, when the girl still had not appeared, her friends contacted her family. At that moment, Sophia's mother, Marie, had not yet flown out of Uganda, and so she hurried as quickly as possible to the site of her daughter's disappearance, accompanied by embassy representatives. With the sunrise, the search continued. Rangers, police officers, and soldiers all joined the effort. Soon, helicopters and a team of drone operators sent by the Dutch authorities also arrived to assist. Quite quickly, the rangers found the plastic bottle that Sophia had been using to throw away trash. The bottle lay about 5 meters from the bank of the White Nile. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why was the bottle there? Why had the girl gone to the river? Had she really gotten lost? The number of questions increased when, on October 30th, about 40 hours after Sophia's disappearance, the rangers found other personal belongings of the girl. The items were located 50 meters from the bottle. The rangers discovered her pants, underwear, a single shoe, sunglasses, a torn 1,000 shilling note, and an empty souvenir bag that Sophia had bought in Kampala. 72 hours after the search began, the Ugandan police publicly announced that Sophia had been attacked by wild animals. This was their official conclusion. The story could have ended there, if not for the girl's family, who wanted to know more about what had actually happened. Marie continued to fly to Uganda over and over again to clarify the details of her daughter's disappearance. By August 2025, she had visited the country nearly 30 times. She realized that at the moment of Sophia's disappearance, the police had not conducted a proper investigation. She believed that something terrible had happened in Uganda 10 years earlier, and that the police were trying to cover it up. And she was probably right, because the worst details had not yet surfaced. It turned out that none of Sophia's belongings bore blood or signs of struggle. No one had heard any screams or calls for help, exactly what one would expect from an attack by a wild animal. But nothing was like that. Sophia's pants were found cut into thin strips. Together, these strips were about the length of one pant leg. The strips were wound around branches. Nearby lay a completely clean shoe without any dirt or blood. Sophia's underwear hung on a tree 5 meters above the ground. Finally, her sunglasses and souvenir bag were lying as if someone had carefully placed them on the ground. But what kind of animal lays out belongings like that? Moreover, according to the rangers, these items appeared 40 hours after Sophia's disappearance. They had not been there during the initial search, The Rangers were certain because they had inspected the area. Thomas Coyne, a survival instructor who trained Navy SEALs and soldiers, examined the evidence and stated that the pants had been deliberately cut with a knife. They were not torn by animal teeth. The animal attack explanation was a convenient version for the local police, allowing them to quickly label the case as an unfortunate accident. But the evidence, or rather, the lack of expected evidence, told a different story. It goes without saying that once these facts became known, the theory of a wild animal attack could not withstand any scrutiny. However, at the same time that new facts about the case were coming to light, details about Sophia's health began to leak into the Ugandan press. When she was 16, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Typically, this condition leads to sharp mood swings. A person can feel extreme elation, joy, or inspiration, followed by sudden shifts into sadness or depression. In Sophia's case, however, she only experienced the emotional highs without depressive episodes. Even then, according to her family, these highs occurred quite rarely. Marie explained that when Sophia found herself in chaotic environments, she could become overstimulated, but she never harmed herself. In fact, under pressure, she seemed to flourish. Sophia managed her condition with medication and led a perfectly normal life. She was often described as focused, disciplined, and capable of achieving great heights, especially in Uganda, where she earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues. But none of this seemed to matter. Using information about the girl's health, the Ugandan media began to attack her. They wrote that she could put herself in danger, disappear into unknown places, or even harm herself. Some journalists shamelessly called her crazy. Bipolar disorder became a weapon used against her. This scrutiny was even more intense because other tourists had noticed her condition. Several years later, Sophia's mother, Marie, was contacted by a witness, a woman from the United Kingdom who had also been at Kitapo Valley National Park with her family in October 2015. At night, she and her husband woke up due to a strange noise. They couldn't sleep, so they went to check what was happening. On the viewing platform, they saw Sophia. The girl politely apologized for the noise. Sophia spoke clearly and coherently, but despite that, she appeared emotionally vulnerable to the witness. In the morning, the couple approached Michael Kambu, the guide who had taken Sophia's group on the safari. They advised him not to continue the journey until he was sure that Sophia was feeling better. However, he did not take their warning seriously. Later, Sophia's mother, Marie, learned that other students from the Netherlands who were traveling with Sophia had also noticed her condition. According to them, the girl's behavior changed on the 26th. Sophia began to sleep much less at night, spoke non-stop, and tried to break the chairs arranged near the campfire. In the morning, she greatly frightened her safari companions when it turned out that she had spent the night not in a cabin, but outside on the viewing platform. When, stunned, they asked her why she had done this, Sophia explained that she had decided to challenge herself and wanted to see if she could spend the night practically under the open sky. It became impossible to ignore Sophia's behavior, and the other students wanted to call her mother, but Sophia persuaded them not to. However, they told everything to Michael, the guide, who, hoping to ease the tension in the group, changed the route to visit calmer locations. But when they arrived at Murchison Falls, Sophia's behavior, which seemed to have normalized, became unstable again. During a boat ride along the White Nile, the tension in the group started to rise once more. The situation was complicated by the fact that Sophia was irritated by the worried looks directed at her. Possibly for this reason, during the boat ride, she spent a long time locked in the restroom. As her mother later explained, most likely Sophia wanted to hide from the overly bright sounds, lights, and vivid colors of the surrounding area, simply to calm herself. According to her mother, the guide should not have led the group to Murchison Falls at all, since he knew that Sophia was not feeling well. Yet Marie only learned the full story years after her daughter disappeared. Although the local police had forgotten about Sophia's case, her mother could not follow their example. She did not just write emails and wait for a call from the embassy. Every time, she personally flew to Uganda, which allowed her to completely disprove the police's version that Sophia had been attacked by wild animals. But then she learned something even more horrifying. Marie took the case into her own hands and privately initiated DNA testing on all of her daughter's recovered belongings. And besides Sophia's DNA, the Dutch laboratory specialists found a large amount of male DNA on them. On every single recovered item, there was male DNA. These were not the other students from the Netherlands who had traveled with her daughter. Marie also excluded Ugandan police officers who had handled the items. All of them willingly provided DNA samples. Altogether, Marie managed to obtain about 10 samples for comparison. But unexpectedly, it became clear that the list of suspects had to include another 400 people. In 2015, 400 rangers were training less than 2 kilometers from the place where Sophia disappeared. Needless to say, nobody had interviewed them or checked their alibis. If it weren't for Sophia's mother, no one would even have mentioned this publicly. Likewise, no one planned to highlight that the police actually had a witness, someone who had apparently seen Sophia last on that fateful night. The witness, a local ranger whose name is not disclosed, stated that he had seen Sophia near the restrooms before she disappeared. The girl was standing and looking in the direction of the river. Then the same man saw Sophia talking to another ranger. However, the other ranger claimed that he had never spoken to Sophia, and the police simply left him alone. He was neither interrogated nor asked to provide a DNA sample. Considering all the details of the case, Sophia's mother cannot understand how the Ugandan police could close it so quickly. The woman repeatedly says, "If you don't know anything, you cannot rule anything out." That is why she will not stop until the man responsible for that DNA is identified. She replays in her mind the horrors that could have happened to her daughter that night, because the scattered evidence and the complete silence surrounding that night point to something terrible. In 2019, Marie and Gerard managed to meet with the president of Uganda, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni Tibubuwa, and the First Lady. Their meeting led to a new wave of investigation. However, the coronavirus pandemic intervened, followed by national elections and government reshuffles. Then suddenly in July 2025, 10 years after Sophia's disappearance, news broke in Uganda that hit like a bomb. Michael Kazambu, the guide who led Sophia's group through northern Uganda, the man responsible for the tourist safety, who drove the vehicle and chose the rest stops, turned out not even to have a guide's license. Because of this, in July 2025, he appeared in court. Overall, his behavior during that trip raises many questions. First and foremost, he ignored several warnings about Sophia's emotional state. Students from the Netherlands, a British couple, and even another Kidappo ranger, Stephen Nyadru, informed Michael that Sophia was behaving strangely, making noise at night, trying to set grass on fire, which indicated her unstable emotional condition. Stephen Nyadru strongly recommended that Michael seek medical assistance for her and cancel the trip to Murchison Falls National Park. Yet all Michael did was slightly alter the route. The group was supposed to travel to Kitgum, but Michael took them to a quieter location in Gulu, after which they still headed to Murchison Falls. When news of someone disappearing from the tourist group reached Kidappo, Stephen Nyadru called Michael, who lied, claiming that they had stayed in Gulu. But the truth could not be hidden for long, and soon the horrifying news was confirmed. Someone had disappeared from Murchison Falls National Park. Until that moment, Michael had never been held accountable. But now, even in court, he had no answers. And what he did not say could be even more terrifying than what he actually did. So, what is known 10 years after Sophia's disappearance? The idea of an animal attack can be safely dismissed. It is unlikely that Sophia could have drowned, because even if she had entered the water in the dark, she would have heard the music her friends were playing and would have found her way back or called for help. And it is also unlikely that Sophia wanted to harm herself, since her bipolar disorder only led to emotional highs, not depression. However, the place where the girl disappeared did not just suggest, but shouted about the involvement of at least one unknown person. Sophia could not have thrown her underwear to a height of 5 meters, and she certainly could not have cut her trousers into strips of fabric. If nothing else, because she did not have scissors or a knife with her. She could not have hidden her tracks, because no one had ever taught her how. Yet in the area of her disappearance, there were more than 400 men, all fully capable of such skills. And finally, the most undeniable piece of evidence, a large amount of DNA from an unknown man. Today, there are 2 theories about what happened, and both are horrifying. The first is human trafficking. Sophia was a young, solitary foreign girl, and her vulnerable state could have made her an easy target. Unfortunately, human trafficking in Uganda is a widespread problem. Women and children are kidnapped either to demand ransom from their wealthy European or American relatives, or taken to Canada, Egypt, the UAE, or Saudi Arabia, where they are sold for sexual exploitation or forced labor. The second theory is no better because it is possible that Sophia has remained in Murchison Falls National Park forever. One innumerable person, or even a whole group, could have done something terrible to her that night, and then gotten rid of the body, knowing that the local police would rush to close the case. Marege agrees that on October 28th, her daughter encountered the wrong people, and one of them could have been standing next to her that night. The mother insists on checking the DNA of the ranger who was seen with Sofia before she disappeared. She is confident that this will either clear his name or lead to a real breakthrough in the case. Marege laments that, being a citizen of one of the wealthiest countries in the world, you expect help and support when a tragedy happens abroad. But you only believe that while everything is going well, because as soon as a tragedy occurs, the Dutch police wash their hands of it, forcing the family of the missing girl to pay for the investigation and all the analyses. And the local police, instead of doing their job, blame the victim. Why did they decide to call Sofia insane and not investigate the case? Why did they cling to a single piece of the puzzle and ignore her successful studies, career, and achievements? To cover someone up? To avoid criticism about local safety? Or was it simply easier to blame an animal than to investigate a crime? Or maybe because by calling her insane, they could avoid answering questions such as how her underwear ended up in a tree, who planted all the evidence, or whose DNA was found on all of Sofia's personal belongings. Because if Sofia was emotionally unstable, then someone else remained calm and cold, someone dangerous, who knew how the police in Uganda operate, and possibly even dressed in a ranger's uniform. For as long as she could remember, Kirsty Jones had dreamed of traveling. She wanted to see as many places as possible beyond her home in Wales, UK. At the age of 14, she firmly decided that after finishing school, she would spend a year traveling around Australia. No sooner said than done. Of course, her parents, Sue and Glyn Jones, as well as her younger brother Gareth, worried about Kirsty, but they didn't stand in her way. Instead, they supported her wanderlust. They knew there was no point in trying to hold her back. So in 1996, at the age of 18, Kirsty left the family farm near the village of Tredeman and set off on her journey with a travel companion she had met through an ad in the local newspaper. The year Kirsty spent traveling around Australia completely changed her. She had left home as a child and returned as a confident, much more self-reliant and independent young woman. She enrolled at the University of Liverpool, but all her thoughts were focused on her next adventure. Kirsty studied and worked 2 jobs to save money for her future trip. This time, she planned to spend 2 years traveling solo, backpacking through Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and South America. After that, she promised her parents she would finally settle down. Sue and Glyn agreed. They were worried about their daughter traveling alone. But 23-year-old Kirsty was older, wiser, and far more experienced than during her first trip to Australia, and they were proud of her for following her dream. They also knew she wouldn't be alone for long. People were naturally drawn to confident, outgoing Kirsty, and it wouldn't take her much time to make friends with other travelers. Besides, at some point, her best friend and her boyfriend were supposed to join her. And by 2000, technology had advanced enough for her parents to stay in touch with her through video calls and email. Kirsty left in May 2000. She spent a few weeks in Malaysia and Singapore before arriving in Thailand. She had dreamed of living in Thailand ever since she first visited the country while returning from Australia a few years earlier. After Bangkok, she headed north to Chiang Mai, a city nestled in the mountains about 700 kilometers north of the capital. Chiang Mai attracts travelers with its laid-back atmosphere, Buddhist temples, vibrant nightlife, and low prices. Kirsty checked into the budget airy guest house, which cost her just £1 per room. She emailed her family, telling them about visiting hill tribes and riding elephants in the mountain region she had explored with a guide and a small group of tourists. During that 3-day trek, she met other travelers and was absolutely thrilled. She loved Chiang Mai so much. However, her excitement did not last long. It was around 4:30 p.m. on August 10, 2000, when police in Chiang Mai were called to the RE guest house. A housekeeper had just entered the room of 23-year-old Kirsty Jones and found her lying face down on the bed. A sarong was tightly tied around her neck, and she was completely naked from the waist down, leaving no doubt about what had happened to her. Police rushed to the scene, a typical Chiang Mai guest house, a 2-story building offering tourists simple, budget accommodation. The house had 9 guest rooms, an open bar, and a garden area where travelers could relax. On the 2nd floor, there was also a massage school. Kirsty's room was located on the ground floor. It was a small, very basic space furnished with a bed, an old wooden wardrobe, and a table fan. Floral curtains hung over the window, a necessity since the window looked out not onto the street but essentially into the corridor. Although the police hurried to the crime scene, they were not the first to arrive in Kirsty's room. Local journalists often monitor police radio channels to be the first to learn about incidents, and in this case, an entire television crew got there before the authorities. Onlookers also didn't hesitate to peek inside to get a look at the murdered girl's body, and they didn't leave even after the police arrived. By the time investigators began collecting evidence, around 20 people had already been in the room. The reporters behaved with no respect for the deceased. They rifled through Kirsty's personal belongings, and one of them even made a judgmental remark after finding a pack of condoms among her things. Another cameraman turned the victim's head from side to side to get a better shot. None of the police officers present seemed at all concerned by what was happening. The victim's body was taken for an autopsy, which confirmed what the police had already suspected. Kirsty had been strangled with a sarong, and before that, she had been brutally assaulted. The police quickly concluded that she had been killed by someone she knew. Her room was located inside the guest house and was secured with a padlock, which could be locked either from the inside or the outside. There were no signs of forced entry, meaning Kirsty must have let her killer in herself. Investigators also believed that the perpetrator was a foreigner. Their reasoning, deeply flawed and rooted in bias, was that Kirsty had been anally assaulted, which according to them was a sexual act that Thai men would never engage in. Most importantly, male DNA was found in her body, which gave the police confidence that the rapist and murderer would soon be caught. All that remained, they thought, was to find the foreigner whose DNA matched the evidence. Meanwhile, Kirsty's parents, Sue and Glenn Jones, who had no idea what had happened, were on vacation in Spain with two friends. They were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. It had been a wonderful trip. They were enjoying every moment of it. On the evening of August 10th, they were getting ready to go out for dinner when someone knocked on their hotel room door. Standing outside were their friends, but their faces said it all. They were pale and deeply upset. They told the couple that they had just been watching the news and had seen a report about the discovery of their daughter's body in a guest house in Chiang Mai. Meanwhile, the police learned that on the previous evening, Kirsty had spent time with two acquaintances, 27-year-old Nathan Foley, an Australian tourist who had stopped in Thailand on his way to visit relatives in the UK, and Sarah Wiggett, a British traveler. Kirsty and Nathan had met at the guest house where they were both staying. They were each traveling alone, and Nathan had been glad to meet someone he could talk to and explore the sights with. Nathan told police that on the evening of Wednesday, August 9th, he had dinner at a local restaurant with Kirsty and Sarah Wiggett. He said he left the two women around 10 p.m., went back to his room, took a couple of sleeping pills, and fell asleep immediately. Sarah Wiggett was staying at another hostel nearby. She was horrified when officers told her what had happened to Kirsty. The two had met during the 3-day trek that had ended just 2 days earlier, and they had quickly become friends. According to Sarah, after Nathan left the previous evening, she and Kirsty went to explore the night markets, which were about a 25-minute walk from Kirsty's guest house. They wandered around the stalls until about 11 p.m. By then, Sarah had finished her shopping and was ready to return to her hostel. Kirsty stayed behind a little longer, saying she still needed to buy a few more gifts before heading back. One of the guest house residents reported that around 1 a.m., he heard a woman screaming coming from Kirsty's room. A female voice was shouting, "Get out! Get out! Leave me alone!" The witness went to check what was happening, but the noise had stopped, so he returned to his room, assuming it was just a lover's quarrel. The man was an experienced traveler who had been staying at the guest house for several months. Such arguments were not uncommon, and they usually ended without any real trouble. The guest house manager, 47-year-old Surin Shempernet, who also ran the massage school on the second floor, confirmed the witness's account that screams were coming from Kirsty's room. He was taking a shower when he heard the noise and went to check, pressing his ear to Kirsty's door, but heard nothing. Not wanting to intrude on the guest's privacy, he returned to his own room and advised another witness to do the same. Police later cross-referenced the coroner's report on the time of death with the time Sarah Wiggett had said goodbye to Kirsty. They concluded that Kirsty had returned to her room around midnight and had been killed within an hour of returning. The police's working theory was that Kirsty had been attacked by a foreigner, another guest at the guest house. Detectives considered the possibility that Kirsty had invited the killer into her room and then refused his advances, which might have enraged him and led to the attack. The senior investigator proposed another controversial theory, that Kirsty had been accidentally strangled during sexual activity that had gone too far. This theory not only offended Kirsty's already grieving family, but also sparked a wave of criticism toward the local police investigation. In any case, the idea of a romantic encounter led to suspicions falling on Nathan Foley, the Australian with whom Kirsty had dinner the evening before her death. Police were particularly bothered that it had taken them several hours to locate Nathan after the body was discovered. Nathan, however, vehemently denied any involvement in the crime or any romantic interest in Kirsty. One by one, all the guest house residents were taken to the police station for questioning, and the guest house was thoroughly searched. During the search, officers found illegal substances in the room of the manager, Surin Champernet. This was not the first time Surin had been arrested for possession. Suspicion arose that Surin might have been involved in Kirsty's murder. However, Surin's girlfriend provided him with an alibi, stating that he had stayed in their room all night, except for the moment he had heard Kirsty's screams and gone to check. As investigators began questioning all the guests and staff in turn, one person's absence immediately stood out. Police could not locate 32-year-old Briton Andrew Andy Gill, who had been living intermittently in Thailand for the past 12 years. He had once been married to a local woman with whom he had a child, and 2 years earlier, he had become the owner of the Airy guest house after the previous owner moved abroad. It took police 2 days to find Andy, who was eventually located at a local bar. He claimed that on the night of the murder, he had not been at the guest house, but had been relaxing with a local friend who could confirm his story. However, a quick check of his documents revealed that Andy was staying in Thailand illegally, as his visa had expired 2 years earlier. He was immediately arrested and fined. After several days of investigation, police finally had a breakthrough. The housekeeper who had initially reported finding Kirsty's body admitted that she hadn't actually discovered it, nor had it been on the afternoon of August 10th. In fact, it had been the guest house owner, Andrew Gill, who found the body at 10:30 a.m. When Andy was questioned, he confirmed this account. It had been late Thursday morning when manager Surin approached him to report the screams heard from Kirsty's room the previous night. Since no one had seen Kirsty on the 10th and the padlock was still hanging outside her room, Andy immediately assumed she had argued with someone during the night and left without paying. Andy had the key to the lock, so he opened the room and, to his horror, found Kirsty's body. He called Surin to show him what had happened. Andy fully understood that the police would immediately learn about his expired visa, so he fled, attempting to contact someone in immigration who could sort out his legal status. Surin confirmed Andy's story, but questions remained. Why hadn't Surin called the police himself? If his goal had been to hide the illegal substances, he had done a poor job since they were quickly found. Considering that Surin had prevented anyone from entering Kirsty's room when the screams were heard the night before, the police began to suspect that these two men might have been trying to cover something up. Andy and Surin quickly became the primary suspects in the investigation. The case took an unexpected turn when 34-year-old Narong Pojanatham Rongpongso, more commonly known as Abraham, came forward to the press and police, stating that he wished to file a complaint. Narong belonged to the Karen tribe, an ethnic minority in northern Thailand. The Karen are a group of peoples who migrated from Myanmar to Thailand in the 1990s, primarily settling in the northern border regions. The most famous branch is the Kayen women, known for wearing brass neck rings, which create the visual effect of elongated necks. Narong recounted that he was walking along a road when a van suddenly slowed down beside him and several men jumped out. They seized him, threw him into the van, blindfolded him, and forced him to swallow something. The next thing Narong remembered, he woke up in a place resembling a cheap motel room. He was surrounded by men in plain clothes whom he initially assumed were police. The kidnappers pressured him to confess to Kirsty's murder. They did not claim he was guilty, but insisted he was a second-class citizen who should help the country by aiding the investigation. They told him that if he agreed, he would face prison time, and if he refused, he would be executed. Narong knew Kirsty. She had been one of his many clients, but they had never been alone together. That did not matter to his captors. For hours, the men tortured Narong. They stripped him, beat him, stood on his chest and stomach, and pulled and burned his pubic hair. At one point, one of the men ordered him to masturbate to ejaculation, which Narong refused. The man attempted to do it himself, but stopped when it was ineffective. The captors threatened that if Narong's DNA didn't match the crime scene, they would make it match. Terrified, Narong still refused to confess, trusting that God would protect him since he had done nothing wrong. After several hours of torture, he lost consciousness and awoke at a police station on the outskirts of the city, where he was released without explanation. Being a member of the Chiang Mai Tour Guides Association, which supports licensed guides, Narong immediately reported the incident there. An association official advised him to go to the press first before filing a police complaint, fearing that Narong could be framed or used as a scapegoat. Narong followed this advice, contacting journalists and showing his bruised torso. The police promised to investigate this shocking case, but none of the attackers were ever found. Journalists noted that Narong had been extremely fortunate not to have been forced to sign a confession, and even more fortunate to have survived, given the treatment of ethnic minorities in Thailand. Thus, up until the 10th day of the investigation, the police had made no real progress in the case, yet it had already become plagued by scandals and criticism from which it was difficult to recover. Finally, the DNA test results that detectives had been hoping for arrived, but their hopes were in vain. The DNA did not match any of the guest house residents or staff. Moreover, it belonged not to a European, but to a man from Southeast Asia. Despite this, the police persistently claimed they were looking for a foreigner, arguing that he might have been an accomplice to the rapist. They ordered a retest of the DNA, while also offering a reward of 30,000 Thai baht for any information related to the case. Considering that the monthly salary in Chiang Mai was around 8,000 baht, this was a highly attractive sum for local residents. On Thursday, August 31st, the results of the second DNA test came in, and once again, there were no matches. For the first time since the start of the investigation, the police were forced to admit that the case was not as easy to solve as they had originally thought. One by one, the men were officially cleared of suspicion, and their passports were returned, all except for manager Surin. Although his DNA also did not match the sample found on the victim, the police still considered him a potential accomplice. They proposed another highly controversial theory, that the rapist had acquired another man's semen and planted it at the crime scene to mislead investigators. The police chief even claimed that officers had tested this idea on the city streets, and it was supposedly feasible. According to him, such products could be sold by ordinary locals in urgent need of cash, or by sex workers who had preserved semen from previous clients. A rumor quickly spread that on the night of the murder, a foreign man had paid a taxi or tuk-tuk driver for his semen. Though there was no evidence to support this story, the press immediately picked up the tale and newspapers went wild, speculating wildly and sensationally. Journalists then approached the forensic professor working on Kirsty's case to ask if the police theory had any basis. He immediately dismissed the idea, explaining that the DNA had been found deep inside the victim's body, leaving no doubt that it belonged to the actual perpetrator. He emphasized that there was only one attacker, and without question, he was a man from Southeast Asia. 5 weeks later, Surin, still in prison, evidently realized that he needed to take action if he ever hoped to regain his freedom. He made a statement claiming that on the night of the murder, he had seen light coming from the victim's room. Through the curtain, he said he had been able to make out a man's legs and face. He claimed that he thought he recognized the man and became certain when the person left the room, it was the building's owner, a man with an expired visa, Andrew Gill. Although Surin's statement was supported by his girlfriend, the police were unsure whether to believe him. Surin had a reputation for lying, and in this case, he was also someone who could potentially be accused of the murder himself, making his credibility highly questionable. Nevertheless, Andrew Gill was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit violence and murder against Kirsty Jones. This was the first time in Thai legal history that such a charge had been brought. Since no DNA from Andrew was found on the victim and no evidence linked him to the crime scene, he could not be formally charged with the murder itself. Instead, the police suggested that he might have had an accomplice, a local person. Another theory was that Andrew had been watching Kirsty have sex with another man, then slipped into her room and tried to make advances. When she refused, he supposedly attacked and strangled her. Andrew was transferred to a Bangkok prison. Under Thai law, police had 60 days to find his alleged accomplice. Otherwise, they would either have to start a trial or release him. A police officer confidently stated that they were on the right track, claiming that there were no more mysteries. A loud declaration that raised the stakes for Andrew. A conviction could even have led to execution. The wheels of justice in Thailand move very slowly, meaning a person could spend many years in harsh prison conditions awaiting trial. Unsurprisingly, Andrew decided to approach local officials with a financially enticing offer, and it worked. On November 30th, just 12 days before the deadline, all charges were suddenly dropped and he was released. Journalists later discovered that Andrew's father, with the help of his ex-wife, a local woman, had paid £14,000 to someone within the Chiang Mai judicial system to guarantee his son's freedom. Andrew later admitted that the money was intended to remove the charges, but insisted he was truly innocent. The only reason he had fled after discovering the body was panic over his expired visa. He told the prosecutor his story and let him draw conclusions. Since the only evidence against Andrew came from Surin, who was eager to shift blame onto anyone, the prosecution decided to release him. Journalists reporting on the payment also stressed that it was not proof of guilt, noting that in Thailand, the system often works on the principle, no grease, no progress. Thus, the investigation returned to square one. Weeks turned into months, and the chances of solving the case steadily diminished. A year after Kirsty's murder, investigators from Wales traveled to Chiang Mai to assist with the case, only to discover that the Thai police had already closed it. After considerable effort, they managed to convince the prosecutor to reopen the case and appoint new investigators to work on it. In January 2002, the case returned to the front pages after two witnesses contacted the police, claiming that on the night of the murder, they had seen two men near the Airy guest house. One of the men was reportedly a high-ranking tourist police officer in plain clothes. Local news outlets quickly circulated stories suggesting that the DNA evidence supported the theory that Kirsty had been killed by a Thai police officer. Some even claimed that the initial investigation had been deliberately sabotaged to protect the real perpetrator, arguing that revealing the truth would damage the reputation of the Thai police and the tourism industry. At a Bangkok press conference, however, the Welsh detectives refused to comment on this theory. Instead, they praised the local police for their cooperation. This lead went nowhere until 2011, when a mysterious video appeared on YouTube, uploaded by an Australian retiree living in Chiang Mai. He claimed to know the identity of the second man seen near the guest house with the police officer on the night of the murder. According to him, it was a Thai professor at Chiang Mai University who happened to be the younger brother of the officer. The Australian stated that the Department of Special Investigations already knew all the details, but would not act unless it turned out he was wrong. He also said he would not remove the video until the British Embassy obtained a DNA sample from the professor. When Kirsty's family learned of these claims, all they could do was hope that a DNA sample would be taken from the professor. The Welsh detective acknowledged that while the video itself was not evidence, it still represented a potential investigative lead, and they felt it was important to eliminate this possibility, though this was done only indirectly. The Welsh police brought a number of items from the crime scene back to Britain for examination using advanced forensic technology, since at that point the only confirmed fact was that the killer was a man from Southeast Asia. British experts re-examined the sarong used to strangle Kirsty and found semen in skin cells, which allowed them to construct a complete DNA profile. Thailand did not have a centralized DNA database for comparison, but the sample was checked against suspects, including the police officer who had been seen near the guest house. And, in a sense, they found a match. While the tourist guide Narong was fully cleared of suspicion, the DNA comparison suggested that the rapist could be one of his relatives, a member of the same Karen tribe. Welsh detectives recommended that the Thai police conduct a mass DNA collection within certain parameters in Chiang Mai, but the local authorities refused. This was extremely frustrating, but since the Thai police remained in charge of the investigation, the Welsh detectives' hands were tied. They could not impose their conditions on their Thai colleagues. In 2014, the Thai police again came under harsh criticism following the murder of British tourists Hannah Witheridge and David Miller on Koh Tao. Authorities were accused of corruption and covering up the truth after the two Burmese suspects claimed that police had tortured them into giving false confessions. After the Burmese men were sentenced to death for the killings, a video appeared in 2015, posted by someone claiming to be a member of Anonymous. The video accused the Thai police of blaming foreigners when under pressure to solve high-profile cases quickly. The Anonymous representative also proposed a new theory regarding Kirsty's murder, suggesting it might be connected to an earlier attack on tourists Sherry McFarlane and Kelvin Burke. In February 2000, the same year Kirsty was killed, Sherry and Kelvin, both Australians, were traveling in northern Thailand near Chiang Mai. One evening, after setting up a tent, they were attacked by several men. Kelvin was killed immediately while trying to protect Sherry. Sherry gave the attackers all her valuables, but they still assaulted her, then stabbed her and left her to die. She was found by a ranger about 500 meters from the attack site. The police quickly arrested two members of a local tribe who were later tried based on confessions they later claimed were coerced. Eventually, DNA testing cleared them, and they were released. The real perpetrators of Sherry and Kelvin's attack were never found. Their families joined a growing list of grieving relatives questioning how the Thai police investigate murders of foreign tourists. For the Jones family, each year without a breakthrough in Kirsty's case was painful and profoundly discouraging. It became a race against time, as Thai law sets a 20-year statute of limitations for unsolved murders. After that, even if the killer is identified, they cannot be prosecuted. Kirsty's family did everything possible to maintain local police interest in the case, believing the perpetrator would eventually be found. In 2017, a Welsh politician even appealed to Prime Minister Theresa May to intervene and encourage Thai authorities to use new DNA technologies to bring the killer to justice. Theresa May expressed condolences to the family, but made it clear that the UK government could not interfere in another country's investigation. On August 10, 2020, the case of 23-year-old Kirsty Jones was officially closed. The murder remains unsolved, and the killer is still at large. Nevertheless, Sue and Glenn Jones continue to encourage future solo travelers not to fear visiting Thailand. Despite what happened to Kirsty, they believe that her travels shaped her character, making her strong, confident, and independent. In their view, there is no need to limit children, hold them back, or block their dreams of seeing the world, because children are like grains of sand. The harder you squeeze, the faster they slip through your fingers. Death Valley is a desert valley located in the state of California, near the Nevada border, to the east of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. It is one of the hottest places on the planet. On July 10, 1913, the National Weather Service recorded a record-breaking temperature of 56.7 degrees Celsius in Death Valley, the highest temperature ever officially recorded on Earth. The area in question spans approximately 7,800 square kilometers. In the very heart of this natural furnace, an adventurous tourist from Germany, Egbert Rimkus, was vacationing with his girlfriend Cornelia and two small children. Having rented a green Plymouth Voyager minivan, Rimkus, short on money, limited on time, unprepared, and carrying minimal supplies, ventured into a land that never forgives mistakes. Guided only by a basic map, he and his passengers turned off the melting asphalt road and headed down a brutal off-road path toward the southern edge of the valley. Yet inside the air-conditioned minivan, the passengers probably seemed like any other cheerful tourist discovering a new place. On October 21, 1996, Death Valley National Park Ranger Dave Brenner was patrolling the area by helicopter. His mission was to locate illegal drug manufacturing sites hidden in remote parts of the park. Around noon, the ranger spotted a vehicle in Anvil Canyon. What caught his attention was that it wasn't an off-road vehicle. It was a regular minivan. He was surprised, as a vehicle like that would typically be unable to reach so deep into the canyon due to its rough and uneven terrain. Adding to the strangeness, just 2 years earlier, a law had been passed designating the area as a nature preserve, meaning that driving beyond the lower section of the canyon was strictly prohibited. When the helicopter landed, the ranger was able to inspect the vehicle and the surrounding area. The car turned out to be a green 1996 Plymouth Voyager with California license plates. It was locked and appeared to have been there for quite some time. The front left and both rear tires were flat, and tire tracks showed that the vehicle had driven several kilometers in that condition before finally getting stuck in the sand. A check on the license plate revealed that the minivan had been reported stolen since September 10th. It belonged to the rental company Dollar Car Rentals and had been rented by a group of German tourists in Los Angeles on July 8th. The tourists were identified as 34-year-old Egbert Rimkus, his 11-year-old son, Georg Weber, Egbert's 28-year-old girlfriend, Cornelia Meyer, and her 4-year-old son, Max Meyer. The minivan was supposed to be returned on July 26th, but the family never showed up at the agency. Since the company has a lenient policy toward clients, they usually wait at least 30 days before reporting a vehicle stolen to the authorities. Further investigation revealed that the group had been living in Dresden, Germany, and had flown to Seattle, Washington in early July. From there, they traveled to Los Angeles, where they rented the car. The family had booked return flights to Germany for July 27th, but they never made it to the airport. Investigators learned that the family had been struggling financially. His ex-wife and Georg's mother, Heike Weber, said that Rimkus had sent her a fax from a hotel in Las Vegas asking her to send him money, but she refused. Now she was panicked and confused, wondering what he had planned and where he had taken their son. A German travel agency eventually contacted the U.S. rental company, and upon discovering that both the vehicle and the family were missing, reported the disappearance to Interpol. On October 22nd, Officer Eric Inman officially launched the investigation into the disappearance of the German tourists. Aside from the tire tracks previously documented by Ranger Dave Brenner, there were no visible footprints near the vehicle. However, police did find a few food wrappers and some toilet paper in the vicinity. Upon opening the doors of the minivan, officers discovered an American flag that had originally come from the Butte Valley Stone Cabin, commonly referred to as the geologist's cabin. This remote shelter, located about 6.5 kilometers west of where the minivan was found, serves as a refuge for weary travelers. It includes limited food supplies and a spring with clean drinking water. Traditionally, travelers raise the flag to signal that the cabin is occupied. It appears the German tourists were unaware of this custom and may have taken the flag as a souvenir. Inside the van, police also found 2 full bottles of Bud Ice beer, 1 empty and 1 half-full bottle of bourbon, several empty containers that had once held water or juice, clothing, undeveloped film, a camera, 1 new Coleman sleeping bag, along with an empty package for a second, a tent, a tobacco pipe, bank cards, children's toys, a spare tire, and a jack. The film from the camera was developed, revealing that the group had visited the California coast before heading to the Treasure Island Hotel in Las Vegas. They checked out of the hotel on July 22nd and then traveled to Death Valley. Their intended final destination was Yosemite National Park in California, but they never made it. According to receipts from the local visitor center, someone had purchased 2 informational booklets about Death Valley in German on that day. One of those booklets was later found inside the minivan. After visiting the Death Valley Visitor Center on July 22nd, the tourists likely spent the night in their minivan in an area known as Hanopa Canyon, possibly to save on hotel costs. While reviewing the guest logbook at an abandoned camp near the old Warm Spring mine, investigators discovered an entry written in German and dated July 23rd. The note read, "We're going over the pass," and was signed Connie, Egbert, Georg, and Max. The pass they referred to was most likely Mengel Pass, a mountain crossing located several kilometers from the canyon. It's one of the few routes through the rugged Panamint mountain range, stretching across many kilometers. However, it's an extremely rough trail, filled with boulders and deep pits at nearly every turn. A path barely manageable even for high-clearance 4x4 vehicles, let alone a minivan. After what was likely a failed attempt to reach the mountain pass, the group seems to have changed direction and descended into Anvil Canyon. Unfortunately, that route is just as unsuitable for a minivan, and this is likely where their real troubles began. On the morning of October 23rd, rescue teams began searching for the missing family. Their efforts were focused on the Anvil Canyon area. That same day, rescuers found a Bud Ice beer bottle lying in the sand near a bush almost 3 kilometers east of the minivan. It was clear that someone had sat down to rest next to that very bush. On the second day, the search area was expanded. Additional rescue teams arrived from neighboring counties, along with 2 helicopters. In total, at least 250 people took part in the operation. Rescuers were confident they had correctly calculated the search zone and believed success was within reach. But no trace of the tourists was found. With no new clues apart from the beer bottle discovered on the first day, and losing hope that the travelers could still be alive, the teams eventually called off the search. Over the following years, rescuers and volunteers made numerous renewed efforts to locate the missing family. They explored other areas, including abandoned mines and shafts. Special attention was given to the case by author and researcher Emmett Harder and engineering professor Dick Hasselman. Emmett Harder obtained permission from the Inyo County Sheriff's Office to review the photographs taken by the tourists. Thanks to his familiarity with the landscape, he recognized one of the sunrise photos as having been taken in Hanopa Canyon. Considering the confirmed visit to the Death Valley Visitor Center on July 22nd and the visitor's log entry at the old mine camp on July 23rd, it could be reasonably assumed that the family had camped at the upper part of Hanopa Canyon on the night of July 22nd. In his search report, Dick Hasselman noted that an off-road driver had discovered 2 German-style canteens approximately 5 kilometers from where the minivan was found. Additionally, within the 3-month window between the family's trip to Death Valley and the later discovery of their vehicle, a ranger patrolling the region had come across a sleeping bag on a remote dirt road roughly 18 miles south of the van's location. Could this have been the missing sleeping bag from the German tourists? At the time, the ranger dismissed it as trash, since the road was extremely remote. Search teams were especially puzzled by the fact that the tourists had vanished without a trace, which led to numerous theories about what might have happened to them. Beyond the most obvious explanation, that the family got lost, suffered tire failures, and succumbed to the brutal heat of Death Valley, more mysterious and conspiratorial theories began to circulate. Hasselman speculated that Rimkus, who had shown interest in industrial research and rocket propulsion, might have attempted to infiltrate the nearby Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake. His ex-wife mentioned that Egbert had been obsessed with the idea of sneaking onto restricted military territory to witness weapons testing. Unfamiliar with the harsh terrain of Death Valley, Rimkus might have believed he could cross Mengel Pass and get closer to his dream. But since such a route is impassable by minivan, the vehicle ended up stuck in Anvil Canyon instead. Some went further, suggesting that the family saw something they weren't supposed to on the military base, and that the government had made them disappear. Others believed the tourists may have taken a shortcut toward Yosemite and stumbled upon criminals, or even members of the infamous Charles Manson family, who, according to rumors, were still hiding out at the remote Barker Ranch. Yet the most widely circulated theory was that Egbert had staged his own disappearance and kidnapped the children. Former colleagues claimed he had once mentioned plans to move to Costa Rica. But if that was the case, why choose Death Valley, one of the most unforgiving places on Earth, to fake a disappearance? There were no new developments in the case until 2009, when it caught the attention of Tom Mahood, a member of the Los Angeles County Search and Rescue Team. In the fall of 2009, after meeting with Emmett Harder and Dick Hasselman and studying police reports, Mahood had a remarkably simple insight. Since the tourists were unfamiliar with the terrain and had likely relied only on the primitive maps in their visitor booklets, search teams should try doing the same. Based on this logic, Mahood began piecing together a theory about what may have happened to the family. The tourists likely spent the night of July 22nd camping in Hanopa Canyon, where they rested, took photos, perhaps intending to show them to relatives upon their return to Germany, and gained a false sense of confidence. Although the road was rocky, the minivan had managed it so far without incident, probably leading them to underestimate what the broken lines on their map truly represented. The next day, still managing to navigate the rough terrain, the family reached the abandoned Warm Springs mine camp. There, unexpectedly seeing a green canopy and structures, they came upon the remains of a concrete settlement built in the 1930s by Louise Grantham, one of the wealthiest mine owners in Death Valley during her time. Back in her heyday, Grantham had hired cooks to serve hot meals in a spacious dining hall. If the family believed they'd stumbled upon a functioning settlement where they could ask about road conditions, they were mistaken. The camp had been abandoned for decades. Still, they could rest in the shade of trees, find shelter in the concrete buildings, and refill with fresh water from the nearby spring. At the site, Cornelia Meyer came across a visitor logbook. In German, she wrote, "We are going over the pass," and signed all their names. It's unclear whether this was an overly confident declaration or a kind of breadcrumb trail. A quick note before setting off on a grueling journey. Beyond the camp lay Mengel Pass, a brutal mountain crossing where travelers had to climb over boulders in the searing heat. Only serious off-road vehicles could handle such terrain. But on the crude map the family had, the road didn't look any more threatening than what they'd already faced. Next, the family reached another old structure, the Butte Valley Stone Cabin, also known as the Geologist's Cabin. Maintained by volunteers, the shelter is intended to offer rest and refuge to passersby. Egbert, Cornelia, and the children likely stopped there, hoping again to find someone for directions. But the cabin was empty. They left, taking the American flag. When they finally reached Mengel Pass, it became clear the minivan couldn't make the climb. They gave up the attempt and turned into Anvil Canyon, following what remained of an old mining road, perhaps still rushing toward Yosemite. The minivan did its best to handle the terrain, but the journey became too much. Sharp rocks punctured the tires, and eventually the vehicle got stuck in the sand. Despite having a jack and a spare tire, the family couldn't free the minivan. Now they had to decide where to go on foot. In the years that followed, rescuers would theorize that the family had attempted to return on foot to the geologist's cabin, a known reachable place with food, water, and shelter. But they chose a different route. The nearest road shown on their map was 27 kilometers away. Facing the brutal desert heat and carrying two small children, Egbert and Cornelia likely judged that distance as too far and too risky. There was no guarantee anyone would be on that road anyway. Returning to the geologist's cabin would mean hiking 6.5 kilometers back, climbing over rocks in the scorching sun, and despite the shelter and supplies waiting there, they may have feared going backward into isolation, especially after seeing no one there for 2 days. Then came a third option. Egbert may have recalled that a military base, China Lake Naval Air Weapons Station, was marked on the map roughly 14 kilometers away. Coming from Germany and familiar with how European bases operate, he likely assumed a U.S. base would be staffed around the clock with armed patrols, guards, and possibly helicopters. If they could just reach it, they would surely be noticed and helped immediately. Many would argue that heading back to the geologist's cabin was the safest and smartest move. Eventually, other travelers or volunteers would have arrived. But believing that the military base guaranteed quick rescue, or perhaps still clinging to hope of catching their flight, Egbert and Cornelia chose what they thought was the best way out. It was a fatal miscalculation, not because they were met with violence, but because, tragically, there was no one there at all. No patrols, no helicopters, no rescue. One way or another, the family now only needed to figure out how to get there. Egbert likely volunteered to scout ahead and find a path that they could manage with the children. About 3 kilometers east of the minivan, he sat down under a bush in a semblance of shade and drank a beer. He left the bottle there. Months later, this would be the only item found during the search for the missing family. 1 kilometer from the bush, he discovered something like a road that didn't seem so intimidating. He checked the map and concluded that heading in that direction would lead the family to the military base. Egbert could now return to Connie and the children. Given their lack of supplies and protection from coyotes, it was too dangerous to walk with children at night. They set out early in the morning, locking the vehicle behind them. They had very little food and even less water, and no means of resupply. The road Egbert found was 4 kilometers away. For a healthy adult under normal circumstances, that would be less than an hour's walk. But this was not a normal day, nor normal terrain, and they weren't a group of fit adults. They were poorly prepared, even for a moderate hike, wearing regular shoes, not suitable for rough walking. Still, while the journey was difficult, it didn't seem impossible. After 4 kilometers, the wide road veered right and appeared to dead end in the mountains. Maybe they were already picturing the safety of military infrastructure just a few kilometers away. They had been walking for around 3 hours. In total, they would be on the move for 5-6 hours. In such heat, adults lose about 2-3 liters of fluid per hour, and children about half that. To stay hydrated, they would have needed to drink 20-30 liters of water before reaching the base. But they didn't have anywhere near that much. And by now, the temperature had risen above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, with no sign of relief. After 2 more hours, they finally climbed a ridge, only to see more mountains and more sand. Nothing else. Not a trace of civilization. The military base, which they had imagined as a secure compound with hundreds of soldiers, turned out to be a vast expanse of desert, spanning thousands of square kilometers, with no reason to be regularly patrolled. Desperate, the tourists must have spotted a sheer slope in the distance. They headed that way. Even reaching that bit of shade in their condition probably took another hour. It's incredible they made it that far, but they had nowhere else to go. Evening came. They stopped there, likely unable to walk any farther, yet maybe still holding on to hope that someone would find them. Sadly, for the next 13 years, no one did. The vast, overwhelmingly empty, yet hauntingly beautiful landscape of Death Valley was the last thing they ever saw, before surrendering to the desert, lying down on the sun-scorched sand, and taking their final breath of blistering, searing air. While professional rescuers asserted that Egbert and Cornelia with their children would not have gone in the direction of the desert naval base, and therefore decided not to conduct searches there, Tom Mahood came to the conclusion that they were mistaken and that this was actually a likely direction for the tourists. Emmett Harder had already attempted to explore that direction several years earlier, but Tom wanted to go even further, all the way to the base's boundary. After many days of searching, Tom and his colleague Les Walker finally found the bones in the diary of Cornelia Meyer. Of course, torn and faded by the sun, but well enough preserved to identify its owner, southeast of the desert area called Golar Wash. The bones of Connie and Egbert were found approximately 13 kilometers from the minivan in a very remote desert area. Behind them were beer bottles and 2 empty water containers. This discovery put an end to all questions and hopes that the missing tourists were living a secret life in a distant country. During subsequent searches, smaller bones were also found, but DNA analysis to definitively confirm that they belonged to Max and Georg was no longer possible. This story serves as a sad reminder that nature can quickly turn into a deadly trap for unprepared travelers. When venturing into the desert, it is important to take plenty of supplies, an accurate map, choose a suitable vehicle, and inform someone about your planned route. Death Valley can be a very dangerous place for those who are not ready to face it head-on. The internet has revolutionized the process of choosing gifts for New Year and Christmas. A few clicks of the mouse, a couple of days for delivery, and you receive any gift, carefully packed and carefully delivered by a courier. But there were times before the era of instant gratification when to go shopping you had to leave the house and immerse yourself in the world of shopping centers, hypermarkets, and boutiques. So on December 23, 1974, 3 girls, practically girls, went shopping at the mall, unwittingly depriving their families of the festive spirit of that New Year's Eve and all the years since. But the families are still waiting and hoping that new evidence will soon be found that can shed light on the nearly half-century-long mystery of the disappearance of the Fort Worth trio. The girls were Mary Rachel Terlika, Lisa Renee Wilson, and Julianne Mosley. Rachel, 17, was the oldest of the girls and had movie star looks. She had been married for 6 months, which was not as unusual in 1974 as it would be today. Rachel's husband, Thomas Terlika, whom she affectionately called Tommy, was a handsome 21-year-old. Despite his age, Tommy was divorced and had a 2-year-old child from a previous marriage. Before marrying Rachel, he was engaged to her sister Deborah. Deborah was 2 years older than Rachel and just as pretty. Years later, she would roll her eyes and tell the media that her engagement to Tommy was fake. She always said there was no jealousy or animosity between her and Rachel over Tommy. By all indications, that was true. Shortly before her disappearance, Rachel even invited her sister to stay at her house after Deborah broke up with her boyfriend. She was still living with the couple when Rachel went missing. On December 23, 1974, Rachel decided to go Christmas shopping at the Seminary South Shopping Center. She asked Deborah to come with her, but she was tired and wanted to sleep. So Rachel invited her friend Renee, who was visiting her grandparents at their home on Gordon Avenue. Their families were close friends, and the girls had known each other all their lives. That morning, Renee was hanging out with her boyfriend, 15-year-old Terry Mosley, who lived across the street. He woke her up to surprise her with a promise ring before an engagement ring, which is worn to signify fidelity. More than 4 decades have passed since then, but Terry recently opened up about the ring he gave to the girl he loved so long ago. I think it had the dolphins on it that she loved so much. When Rachel called to invite her to go shopping, Renee agreed, but only if they were back no later than 4 p.m. She and Terry were going to a Christmas party that evening, and she wanted to make sure she had time to get ready. It would be the first party she would wear her new ring to, and Renee wanted to look her best. Life in Fort Worth, Texas, like many other parts of the country, was different in the 1970s than it is today. His father left home and his mother had to work, so she was never home, Terry Mosley recalls. On December 23rd, Terry was home because he was on vacation. "I would be more careful today, but then we could be home without our parents," Terry said. His sisters, Janet, 11, and Julie, 9, were also home, and he had crossed the street that morning to see the girl, Renee Wills, 14. Before Terry left Renee, she told him she was going to the store to pick up a pair of jeans that had been set aside for her. "She wanted me to go with her," Terry said. "I backed out, kind of at the last minute, because my friend had to go into the hospital for surgery. I promised him I'd spend time with him, and I didn't want to break that promise," Renee told Terry she was going shopping with Rachel. Rachel and Renee invited Janet to join them on their trip to the mall, but Janet chose to stay with her friend. That's when Terry's younger sister, Julie, saw an opportunity to spend time with the 2 older girls. "I know Renee and Rachel didn't want to take Julie because she was only 9, Terry recalls. "So they tried to get around it by telling her she could only go if she got her mother's permission. They were sure she wouldn't allow it, as she always did." Julie excitedly called Ryan Mosley's mom at work and asked if she could go with the girls. Her mom said no. Julie had no money, and besides, although she knew Renee very well, she did not know Rachel. But Julie begged to let her go, explaining that otherwise she would have no one to go out with. The mother finally gave in and allowed her daughter to go to the mall. Shortly before noon, Rachel, Renee, and Julie climbed into a 1972 Oldsmobile 98. It was a powerful car, long and wide. It was easy to imagine the parents' confidence that their daughters would be safe in such a car. After all, no one could know where danger would be waiting for them. First, the friends stopped at the Army-Navy store to pick up the jeans they had set aside for Renee. Then the girls headed to Seminary South Shopping Center. Later, several shoppers would report seeing their friends there. Renee, in particular, stood out from the other girls because of her clothes. According to witnesses, she was wearing either a white jumper or a pale yellow-green t-shirt with the words "Sweet Honesty" written on it. While the girls were shopping, their families were also busy with their own affairs. The parents went to work, the brothers went out for a walk. It was a normal day in Fort Worth. No one could have imagined that their lives would never be the same again. If Renee hadn't been so eager to attend Terry's Christmas party, it might have taken longer for her family to realize something was wrong. But she was determined to be home by 4 p.m., and the families noticed that the girls were still missing by the appointed time. Julie's mother also told her not to be late and was upset when the girl didn't show up on time. Rachel's family, in turn, thought that maybe her car had broken down. There were no cell phones back then, so the worried family drove to the mall, looking along the road for Rachel's car. When they didn't see it, they drove around the mall parking lot, trying to spot the brown 98 Oldsmobile in a sea of cars on one of the busiest days of the year. Around 6 p.m., they saw the car parked on the top level of the Sears lot. The doors were locked and a single wrapped Christmas present was lying on the floor in front of the back seat. It was believed that it was a gift Renee had purchased for Rachel's 2-year-old stepson, Sean. Other sources say the girls had done more shopping and there were many presents in the car. Whatever the case, the friends themselves were nowhere to be found. Rachel's younger brother, Rusty Arnold, was 11 when the girls went missing. Now in his 50s, he remembers driving with his mother, Fran, to the mall to look for his older sister and her 2 friends. There were a lot of people. It was impossible to find 3 girls in such a crowd. But Fran turned out to be a resourceful woman who was not going to rely on luck. She took Rusty to each store and asked the manager to call the girls on the loudspeaker. No one answered. Fran wasn't the only one who thought something was wrong. Renee's father, Richard, and their neighbor had climbed onto the roof of a nearby building that evening to keep an eye on the car. The men pointed their guns at the abandoned Oldsmobile. They didn't know what they were waiting for, but they were going to be ready. The families called all the girls' friends, asking if they'd seen or heard anything. No one knew anything. They called the hospitals and, of course, the police. The police, the city, and the family's stories are divided on what happened next. The families claimed that the police did not take the girls' disappearance seriously because they assumed they had run away. But that theory didn't hold up. Why would they have asked Terry, Janet, and Debris to join them if they were planning to run away? Why would they have taken a 9-year-old girl with them? None of them had taken any clothes or personal belongings. They had little money and abandoned the car in a parking lot. It all made very little sense. I can tell you that they did not run away that night. Renee wanted to go to that party, and no 9-year-old girl runs away 2 days before Christmas. Everyone knows that, said Judy Wilson, Renee's mother. I don't think the girls ran away. Renee wanted me to go to the mall with her. I'm pretty sure I would have known. A planned getaway, says Terry. And Rachel had this beautiful car. If you're going to run away, why leave it in a car park? Police disagreed with the family's account, saying they were proactive in their investigation from the start. An article that appeared in a local newspaper the day after the girls went missing reported that police were looking for them, but had no reason to suspect foul play. A few days later, police were less certain, telling the paper they did not know whether a crime had taken place. And 4 months later, another article reported that police initially believed the girls had run away. So the period articles partly corroborate the family's account of what really happened. But if the families were right, and the police did not take the case seriously from the start, the letter was probably the reason. The next day was Christmas Eve. The houses were beautifully decorated and lit up with Christmas lights, and brightly decorated presents were already waiting under the decorated trees. It was a festive time, but the girls' families were in no mood to celebrate. Terry Mosley, who lost his sister and girlfriend at the same time, says he couldn't eat or sleep and gave away his gifts. It was also the day Rachel's husband, Tommy Terlika, found a letter in his mailbox. He would later say that he believed the envelope was sealed. The stamp had been placed on the envelope that morning. Rachel's name was written in the upper left corner of the envelope, but there were no names or addresses for the sender. Inside was a piece of paper with sentences written on it in large, slanted handwriting. The letter said, "I know we're going to get in trouble, but we just had to get away. We're heading to Houston. See you in about a week. Car in the Sears parking lot. Love, Rachel." Rachel's family never believed that she wrote the letter. They said that it was not her handwriting. They also pointed out other inconsistencies. For example, the fact that the letter was addressed to Thomas Turlick, even though Rachel always called her husband Tommy. Also, it seems that Rachel's name was originally misspelled. If you look closely, the last letter of her name was originally written as an I and then lengthened to make an L. 6 days after receiving the letter, police told a local newspaper that they had confirmed the handwriting was Rachel's, but also admitted that she may have been forced to write the letter. However, in 1978, Fort Worth police detective George Hudson refuted this claim, revealing that they had sent fragments of the letter Rachel had written to the FBI for analysis, and the results were inconclusive. The letter's true author remains unknown. The stamp on the envelope was also discussed. The stamp had no city, only a blurred postal service number, 76083, with the 3 seemingly printed backwards. The family speculated that the 3 was actually a half-printed 8, which could lead investigators to Weatherford, Texas, a 35-minute drive from Fort Worth. Another possibility was the code 76483, which pointed to Throckmorton, Texas, a small town 2 hours outside of Fort Worth with a population of less than 1,000. Many simply did not believe that the letter could have been sent that day. But in 2001, police confirmed that the stamp was real and valid and that the letter had been sent that morning from Fort Worth. Whoever sent the letter, its contents, unfortunately, were not true. The girls didn't come back a week later. They never came back. The girls disappeared at a time when DNA testing didn't exist. By the time testing was possible, it was too late to examine the car. The letter was eventually tested for DNA, but no matches were found for any of the girls or anyone in the database. Overall, this means that much of the investigation into Rachel, Renee, and Julie's disappearance relied on good old-fashioned detective work by officers, detectives, the girls' families, and even psychics. In the days following the disappearance, residents contacted police to report seeing the 3 girls at the mall. Most noticed nothing out of the ordinary. Others, however, claimed that something caught their attention. Police spoke to a night watchman who worked down the road from the mall. He said he saw a car with 2 men and 3 girls turning onto the road the night of the disappearance. That lead went nowhere. Police also spoke to a ticket seller at the bus station who claimed the 3 girls had inquired about travel to Houston and other destinations the morning after the disappearance. Police said they were unsure how reliable the information was. In early spring 1975, the 3 families, frustrated by the lack of progress in the investigation, hired Joe Swaim, a well-known private investigator. Mr. Swaim was a very flamboyant and public figure. He regularly held press conferences to pressure the Fort Worth Police Department. He also succeeded in getting the police to share copies of the case files with him. He followed up on various leads and claimed to have received tips from informants regarding the location of the girls' bodies. The police conducted numerous searches based on information from the private investigators' anonymous sources. None were successful. At the same time, the police were so desperate for leads that they even agreed to the help of psychics who claimed to know where the bodies were. At one point, they even dug up the ground near an oil well after receiving a call from a seer in Hawaii. Again, nothing came of it. In 1978, police detective George Hudson discussed the case with a local newspaper. He lamented the fact that handwriting analysis had led nowhere and said he had made several trips outside the city to follow up on some leads, but they had led nowhere. His frustration was obvious. Despite claiming that every clue was followed, he says, "We never got further than the parking lot." At one point he adds, "I don't know what else we can do." The article also mentions a lead that police failed to follow up. In 1975, the media reported that an elderly woman told 3 store employees that she had seen a man dragging a girl into a pickup truck on the day she disappeared. She also said that 2 other girls and another man were already inside the vehicle. She did not report this to law enforcement, despite numerous calls from the police. The woman was never found. Several years later, a new witness came forward claiming he was in the mall parking lot on December 23, 1974, and saw a man drag 3 girls into a van. He told authorities he approached the man, who said it was a family matter. His story could never be verified. The case was long and exhausting for all concerned. Finally, it was closed. In 2001, the case was reopened. Science had advanced greatly since 1974, and the families were hopeful that they might finally learn what happened to the girls. Fort Worth police held a press conference to announce that they had spoken to at least 20 new witnesses who said they had seen the girls at the mall. Police have narrowed the list of possible suspects to 5 people. Detective Tom Butcher said, "We can say that they were seen with one person at one point, but we believe there is more than one person involved." Butcher also said witnesses believe the girls left with someone they trusted. Among the new leads, police investigated the testimony of former police officer Bill Hutchins, who was working as a security guard at Sears the night the girls disappeared. Mr. Hutchins was working the night shift and claimed that he was suddenly confronted by another young mall security guard who arrived in a pickup truck at about 11:30 p.m. Apparently, he and the other guard exchanged some harsh words for some unknown reason. Hutchins claimed that he approached the car and saw 3 girls inside. He made a point of emphasizing how they were seated, noting that they all fit in the front seat. The youngest girl sat next to the driver, the oldest in the middle, and the oldest and largest girl sat near the door. He described how they were smiling and laughing and seemed to be there of their own free will. According to Hutchins, he apologized for the words he used during the argument, and they left. Bill added that he reported the incident to police in 1974, but no one investigated the report until the case was reopened in 2001. When it came to light, Fort Worth police told a local news station that they spoke to the security guard described by Hutchins, who denied being with the girls that night. Detectives added that they believe this is a strong lead, but they are focusing on not 1 but 5 different suspects. Unfortunately, the 2001 investigation has also yielded no results, and the case is still open. Police have shared very few details about the case, which is very frustrating for the families. But Terry says he understands them because the case hasn't been closed. Investigators are doing what they can with old information. They have to interview people who must have had that information in their heads for 4 decades, he says. Rachel Risty's brother is the only one trying to make a difference. He is one of the administrators of the Facebook page dedicated to the missing girls, but his efforts do not end there. In September 2018, Risty organized a dive in Benbrook Lake, where the girls disappeared. Risty decided to investigate the lake after learning that one possible suspect's car had gone missing around the time the girls disappeared. If that person wanted to get rid of the car, the closest body of water is the lake, he said. And we didn't just find a car, we found 3. Risty told the media that one of the cars belonged to a person of interest in the case. "We believe the car he was driving disappeared at the same time the girls went missing," he said in August 2018. "We were exploring different theories, and we found that this person lived within 5 miles of Benbrook Lake at the time. That's a lead." Risty said local scientists examined 2 of the cars. Unfortunately, neither was linked to the missing girls. But for the 3rd car, a diver went down and brought back part of it. "I was able to identify what kind of car it was before we pulled it out of the lake," Risty said. "We'll get it out of the lake in the spring. All I can say right now is that this car is interesting." Divers tried to raise a 3rd car in 2019, but it proved too dangerous because the car had spent so much time in the water. In the summer of 2020, Rusty and the divers decided that if they couldn't raise the car, they could at least examine its contents. He said he didn't believe the girls' bodies would be found inside, but he said he had to because neither he nor his mother would ever be able to let go of the lake until they had examined the inside of the car. After the dive, it became clear that there were no girls' bodies in the car, and Rusty and his mother could move on. The problem with cases like these is that they spread, affecting everyone in their path. This case was no exception. In the late 90s, Rusty, who was already an adult but never gave up on the idea of finding his sister alive, contacted private detective Dan James after seeing his ad in the directory. It turned out that Mr. James was familiar with the case and had been following it since 1975, and even had a few theories. He offered his services to Rusty free of charge. The private detective even bragged publicly that he would pay a $25,000 reward for information about the girls. However, he never set up a bank account to pay, and the offer was soon forgotten. Mr. James had been investigating the case for years. It was obviously a dangerous undertaking. He told the media that he had received threats and warnings, but he continued to investigate anyway. He followed every rumor, lead, and conspiracy theory surrounding the case. It was a difficult path, and he dragged Rusty along it. In 2000, Rusty and Dan gave an interview to the local newspaper and theorized that Rachel was the only one left alive. But someone was keeping her far from her hometown, even though she visited every year for Christmas. James also said that someone was hiding evidence to keep him away. Rusty, for his part, told a reporter that someone close to one of the girls was involved in the disappearance. Although he did not name the suspect, a letter published in the newspaper a few days later made his suspicions clear. The letter urged his sister Deborah to take a polygraph test. It was signed by Rusty, Julia's mom, Ryan Mosley, and Renee's parents, Richard and Judy Wilson. Rachel's mom, of course, did not sign the letter, which was unsurprising given that she had recently told the media that she blamed Dan James for breaking up her family and poisoning Rusty's mind. Mother and son had not spoken for several years at the time. In 2009, Deborah posted on an online forum for a crime and missing persons community that she had, in fact, successfully passed 2 polygraph tests, including one by the FBI. She denied any knowledge or involvement in the girls' abductions. Over time, Rusty seemed to believe that the girls were probably already dead. He also mended his relationship with his mother. During an interview in December 2017, he sat next to Fran and seemed a little ashamed when asked about his previous theories. Rusty and Rachel's mother, Fran Langston, continues to place 3 angels on the lawn every Christmas to symbolize the missing girls.